Hello guys! Welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons, and love are told. Go ahead and like, share with your friends, and subscribe. I trudged down the dimly lit street, each step heavier than the last, my shoes squeaking faintly against the wet pavement. My body ached from the 18 hours I'd spent on my feet at the hospital, where the fluorescent lights had flickered like distant stars against the endless hum of machines and monitors. The smell of antiseptic still clung to my scrubs, mixed with the faint scent of my own exhaustion. I could feel every muscle screaming at me to stop, to let go, to just collapse somewhere safe and warm. But home, the one place I thought would feel like that, waited for me, or at least it should have. As I reached the driveway of our suburban townhouse, my eyes caught the faint glint of a new lock on the door. My stomach twisted instantly. My hand went to my keys, fumbling for the familiar turn that should have slid the lock open effortlessly. It wouldn't budge. I tried again, heart sinking with every second that passed, until I stepped back, my chest tight and my palms slick with sweat. Someone had changed the locks. My mind raced, imagining the worst. My stepmother, Miranda. Her daughter, Selena. Both of them had never hidden their disdain for me, but this was deliberate. I rang the doorbell, waiting for the sound of footsteps that never came. My knuckles were raw from pounding, from the instinctual urgency to reclaim a space I had called home for over a decade. A window opened on the second floor, and Miranda's voice floated down, sharp and dripping with mock civility. "Arya, finally home. I was wondering how long you'd take after that marathon shift of yours. Come inside." Her tone was pleasant enough on the surface, but every word carried an undercurrent of venom. I looked up at the familiar face that had tormented so many years of my life, and I felt a heat rising in my chest. She looked different, somehow more polished, more calculated. Selena was behind her, smirking, arms crossed like she owned the world, which in their minds, maybe she did. Miranda held up a clipboard, the papers neatly stacked and intimidating in their bureaucratic perfection. "We've calculated your back rent and utilities, Arya. $36,000. You'll pay, or you won't have a home to come back to." Her eyes gleamed, as if she expected me to collapse in panic and hand over the money immediately. I froze for a moment, the words echoing in my mind. $36,000. My own family, demanding this from me, as though the years of contribution, as though my presence in the house, as though my father's absence and my endless responsibility meant nothing. I wanted to scream, to throw the papers into the air, to make them understand how cruel this was. But the anger, heavy as it was, mixed with exhaustion and the deep, unspoken ache of having grown up in a house that was never really mine. I said nothing. I nodded silently like a child pretending to understand, and turned to leave, each step feeling like I was carrying the weight of every injustice I had ever endured. I walked to my car, the keys trembling in my hands, and sat in the driver's seat. I didn't know where I would go that night. My hospital scrub stuck to me uncomfortably, and the scent of antiseptic clung to my hair and skin. I realized the only place that would take me in without question was the hospital itself. I drove there in silence, the city's neon lights blurring past my tired eyes. I parked in the empty lot and felt a strange sense of familiarity in the fluorescent glare of the hospital entrance. I trudged inside, barely noticing the nurses' quiet greetings, barely noticing the soft hum of the elevators. I claimed a small corner in the staff lounge, curling into myself as I tried to rest, my mind a whirlpool of thoughts. I replayed the years in snippets of my mother's gentle voice, the warmth of her hand on mine, the way she had filled the house with love and laughter. Then, after her death, Miranda's intrusion, her constant rearranging, erasing the memory of my mother, as if it were a blot on the page of their lives. I remembered being 12, watching my father deploy overseas, helpless, while they moved in with smiles too wide, eyes too sharp. I had tried to blend, to keep peace, to pay my share of bills and maintain my presence quietly. And now, decades later, the culmination of their disregard had led to this moment. Locked out, exhausted, alone, and faced with a demand that felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Through the long night, I observed the hospital's quiet rhythm. Machines breathing in soft pulses, colleagues moving through corridors with silent efficiency, patients resting, oblivious to the battle I faced outside. My fingers tapped against my knees, tracing the cold lines of the chair, and I began to formulate a plan. Not one of immediate confrontation, not one of emotional collapse, but one of precision. I reminded myself of every detail, the countless nights I had studied, the endless shifts, the sacrifices made while Miranda and Selena chased leisure and comfort. They underestimated me. They always had. By dawn, the decision was clear. I would respond not with chaos, but with a quiet, undeniable authority. I wouldn't let exhaustion, threats, or intimidation dictate the outcome of my life. I rose, shoulders stiff but steady, and began to prepare. Eviction notices, documents, evidence of every contribution I had made, all of it would be assembled. I wasn't just fighting for space. I was asserting ownership, reclaiming dignity, and proving that the house I had grown up in, the walls that held memories of love and pain alike, belonged to me. That night, as the first light of sunrise crept across the city skyline, I understood something vital. Silence could be louder than screams. My nod the night before had been not of submission, but of calculation. I would leave, yes, but I would return with the authority they never imagined I had. Miranda and Selena could parade their victory in their minds all they wanted. But when the morning came, the house, the truth, and my father's unseen hand would shift the power entirely. I took one last look at the hospital's parking lot, inhaling the sharp, sterile air that smelled faintly of hope. Exhaustion pressed against me like a heavy cloak, but beneath it, a quiet determination ignited. I had endured their manipulation, their cruelty, their false claims of ownership and superiority. Now I would reclaim what was mine, not through force alone, but through careful, deliberate strategy. And when that day came, they would see the full measure of the mistake they had made, locking me out of my own home. The morning sun hit the hospital windows with a soft, almost mocking brightness, reminding me that the world didn't stop for anyone's drama, no matter how painful. I gathered the papers I had stayed up organizing: the eviction notice, utility bills, receipts for every payment I had made over the years, and documentation showing my ownership. My hands were steady, but my chest tightened with anticipation and a low burning fire of vindication. Today, I would confront Miranda and Selena not as the tired, submissive stepdaughter but as the rightful owner of my home. Driving to the house, memories of my childhood surged unbidden. My mother's warm laughter echoing in the hallways, her gentle hand smoothing my hair when nightmares struck, and the subtle kindnesses she had sprinkled throughout my upbringing. And then, after she passed, the sharp contrast: Miranda moved in, rewriting every corner of the house in her own image, dismissing me, belittling me, replacing my mother's memory with her own possessions. It had been subtle at first, a small comment here, a sleight of hand there, until I realized I was no longer living in a home that respected my existence. Instead, I was a tenant in the very house I had grown up in. I arrived, the crisp morning air filling the car as I stared at the front door, imagining the smirks behind the windows, imagining Miranda and Selena planning their next manipulation. I rang the doorbell firmly, letting my own confidence settle like armor. Selena appeared first, her expression smug, her hands on her hips. "Back so soon? Did you finally find enough money to pay us?" She taunted, her voice a syrupy mix of mockery and superiority. Miranda soon appeared behind her, clipboard in hand, looking as composed as ever. But there was a flicker of an almost imperceptible hesitation in her eyes when she saw me approach. I took a deep breath and held the eviction notice up, letting it catch the light. "I don't need to pay anything," I said calmly, "because I own this house. All of it. And I'm here to reclaim what's mine." The words hit them like a thunderclap. Miranda's hand tightened around the clipboard, and Selena's jaw dropped. What are you saying?" Miranda's voice wavered, a crack in the otherwise polished facade she always carried. I let a pause stretch long enough to ensure they felt the weight of every second. "When I turned 21, I continued, my father transferred ownership of this property to me. It was in secret to protect me from exactly this kind of manipulation." Their faces went pale as I handed them copies of the deed, notarized and legally binding, every signature perfectly in place. I could see their outrage and disbelief bubbling up, mixed with the realization that their carefully constructed world was unraveling. Selena's voice, usually sharp and cutting, trembled. "That's impossible. He would never." But I interrupted, calm yet firm. He did. And now every demand, every back rent calculation, every attempt to intimidate me, it's all irrelevant. This house is mine. And it's time you leave. I watched their faces, caught between disbelief, anger, and the dawning recognition that their control had ended. Miranda's eyes flickered to the street, as if she was calculating her next move, and I knew she would not yield easily. Her voice, clipped and harsh now, tried to regain authority. You think you can just take everything from us? Your father would never condone this. I shook my head, cutting her off. He did. And you're going to see why. I pulled out my phone and began recording, ensuring that every reaction, every attempt at deceit, and every hostile glance would be documented. This wasn't just about eviction. It was about exposing the years of manipulation, lies, and cruelty. I spent the next hour calmly walking them through the facts, showing every payment I had made, every contribution I had offered, and every legal right I held. Miranda tried to interrupt, her words sharp with panic, but I held the floor, my voice steady, my presence unshakable. Selena fumed silently, pacing, her arms flailing occasionally, but she had no leverage. The tide had turned entirely. My father's foresight, his quiet protection, had given me a weapon far more powerful than anger or intimidation. Then came the message from my father, Marcus, whom I had called earlier to inform of the situation. I've been watching closely, he said over the phone, his voice calm and decisive. You're not alone. I filed the divorce paperwork weeks ago, and I'm fully behind you. It's time they face the consequences of their actions. I felt a swell of relief, a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the man who had been deployed overseas, the man who had protected me silently all these years, was now physically and legally by my side. Miranda's composure cracked completely when she realized the reality. Her clipboard slipped from her hands, papers fluttering to the floor like defeated birds. Selena's eyes glistened with frustration and rage, but her words faltered. Their attempts to frame me, to portray me as cruel, ungrateful, or unstable, were now powerless against documented truth and legal ownership. I recorded each reaction, each protest, each faltering accusation, knowing this would protect me from any false narratives they might attempt online or in court. I looked at the house itself, walls that had once felt suffocating now glowing with potential. My home, my rules, my peace, everything I had worked for, endured for, and silently suffered for, was finally within reach. I realized that my father's actions were not just a gift of ownership. They were a testament to trust, foresight, and understanding. He had seen the manipulations, the subtle drain on my spirit, and he had acted to ensure I could live without the constant burden of fear or control. That morning, standing in the entryway, I felt the full weight of the journey I had endured. The years of invisible labor, the silent endurance of emotional manipulation, and the endless sacrifices for education and career. Every step, every sleepless night, every moment of quiet endurance had led to this moment where I stood not as a victim, but as a rightful owner asserting my place. Miranda and Selena could rage, flail, and attempt social humiliation, but nothing could undo the legal and moral truth I now held. I gathered my belongings and left the house for a moment, letting the morning air fill my lungs, grounding myself in the certainty that the tide had shifted. Today was not about victory alone. It was about reclaiming identity, asserting boundaries, and proving that silence, strategy, and patience could achieve what brute confrontation often could not. And as I looked back, seeing Miranda and Selena's expressions fraught with disbelief and frustration, I knew that the reckoning had just begun, and that justice, in its quiet but undeniable form, was finally at work. I arrived at the house later that morning, eviction notice and supporting documents in hand, my father, Marcus, at my side. The air was thick with tension as we approached the front door. Miranda and Selena had clearly been preparing for confrontation, their expressions painted with defiance and a flicker of fear. Marcus's presence gave me a quiet strength. I felt the years of his silent protection converge in that moment, reinforcing that I was no longer alone in this fight. The house smelled faintly of Miranda's attempts to reassert control, but that smell would soon be replaced with the order I had earned. I rang the bell firmly, and Miranda opened the door, clipboard in hand, trying to look composed but failing spectacularly. Selena peeked over her shoulder, eyes wide with indignation. Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying authority that immediately shifted the dynamic. "Miranda, Selena, it's time to pack your belongings and leave. You are no longer welcome here." Miranda's face flushed, a mixture of anger and disbelief, and Selena's smirk faltered, replaced with the sharp edge of panic. I handed them the formal eviction notice again, letting the weight of legality settle heavily on their shoulders. I can't believe this," Miranda stammered, her words trembling as she tried to regain composure. "Arya, you're being cruel. You're throwing us out after everything we've done," Marcus interrupted her, his tone firm, controlled. "You threw yourself away, Miranda. Your actions, your manipulations, your constant attempts to bleed Arya dry, this is the consequence. It's time to leave." I watched as her face paled, the realization that all her schemes had failed dawning fully. Selena too was shaking, grasping at her mother's sleeve as if for protection, but there was no safety here, only the undeniable enforcement of what was rightfully mine. As they began collecting their things, I noticed the tension in every movement. Boxes were packed in hurried, sloppy ways, their frustration evident in the occasional curse muttered under their breaths. Every object they carried out seemed to mark a victory I hadn't needed to fight for, physically proof that the house I had longed for, the sanctuary I had dreamed of, was now truly mine. My father and I stood by, silent observers, letting the law and our combined resolve do the work. I could feel a strange sense of calm spreading through me, a satisfaction deeper than any immediate revenge could have delivered. Miranda's parting glance was sharp, but it carried no power. Selena's protests fell flat against the authority of my ownership and the presence of my father. They were moving out of the house, forced to reckon with the consequences of years of manipulation and entitlement. The neighbors watched, some nodding in quiet approval, others whispering, aware of the tension and finally witnessing the justice being enacted. I felt their silent acknowledgement as a validation of the endurance, patience, and strategy that had brought me to this point. Once the last box was carried out and the car doors slammed, I stepped inside, breathing in the familiar scent of the home I had finally reclaimed. It was strange and comforting at the same time. Walls that had once felt alien or oppressive now radiated potential and peace. The sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating spaces that had been cluttered with someone else's version of life, and I could feel the weight of decades of subtle oppression lift from my shoulders. This house, my house, was finally free of demands, manipulation, and fear. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching surfaces, inhaling the faint traces of home that remained, letting myself soak in the feeling of ownership and security. For years, Miranda had tried to erase my existence here, to replace memories and control narratives. But now, as I moved through the spaces that had once belonged to both joy and grief, I realized something profound. Reclaiming my home was also reclaiming my identity. Every wall, every room, every corner now held my presence and my authority, unchallenged and untouchable. Later, Miranda attempted to launch a lawsuit, claiming wrongful eviction, cruelty, and defamation. But with the documentation I had gathered, the proof of ownership, the receipts, the social media posts, and the evidence of their manipulations, the case crumbled quickly. Selena struggled to maintain her social image. Her attempts at online victimhood met with ridicule as facts surfaced. Meanwhile, my father found happiness again with someone new, finally able to extricate himself from a toxic relationship that had threatened the peace of his entire family. The house settled into a rhythm of quiet satisfaction. I returned to my shifts at the hospital, no longer carrying the burden of home conflicts in my chest. The work was still exhausting, the long nights still taxing, but coming home felt like sliding into a sanctuary where my decisions, my rules, and my peace reigned. The memories of my mother, once overshadowed by Miranda's intrusions, now seemed preserved in the light of my reclaimed space. Every step in the hallway, every turn in the familiar corners, reinforced the fact that I had fought not with anger alone but with patience, intelligence, and moral authority. Evenings became times of reflection rather than tension. I could sit with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker outside my window, and allow myself to breathe. The echoes of past manipulation faded as I realized the true victory wasn't just in their eviction, but in the reclaiming of my dignity and autonomy. I could make decisions for the household, host friends, or simply rest without fear of interference or constant judgment. This was a home that respected the work I had done, the sacrifices I had endured, and the person I had become. I sometimes wonder if I went too far, if eviction and confrontation were too severe. But when I see the calm and order now, the freedom and respect that fill these rooms, I understand that setting boundaries and enforcing them is an act of duty or legal rights. It's about protecting one's peace, asserting one's worth, and refusing to allow manipulation and greed to dictate life. Every night as I prepare for the next hospital shift, I feel a quiet pride, knowing I have reclaimed not only a house but the essence of my home and self. I sit by the window, watching the city slowly darken as streetlights flicker on, feeling the weight of the past lift and the space of possibility open. My father smiles when he visits, proud of the strength I've shown, and I see a happiness in him that had been absent for years. Miranda and Selena are gone, their attempts at chaos dissolved, and the house finally reflects a life of respect, love, and rightful authority. I know that every challenge, every long hour at the hospital, every moment of patience and quiet endurance contributed to this triumph. Hello guys, please go ahead and like, share with your friends and subscribe. I'm Aria, and today I want to ask, did I go too far in reclaiming my home? Or was it the rightful stand against manipulation, greed, and years of silent oppression? Leave your thoughts in the comments, share your perspective, and remember the path to justice often requires courage, patience, and unwavering faith in one's own worth.
Moral lesson.
Sometimes the hardest battles are not fought in public, but in the quiet corners of our lives, where patience, resilience, and strategy become our greatest allies. Aria's story reminds us that standing up for ourselves, especially against those who manipulate, belittle, or seek to drain our resources, is not cruelty. It is an assertion of dignity and self-respect. Justice often arrives quietly, in ways that protect us without unnecessary violence or rage, and in reclaiming her home, Aria reclaimed her peace, her identity, and her right to thrive. Setting boundaries, documenting truth, and relying on moral and legal authority are acts of strength, not vengeance alone. Her father's foresight and trust show the power of quiet support, and the importance of allies who understand our struggles, even when we feel alone. Every challenge, every attempt at manipulation, every long night of endurance can prepare us to assert our worth when the time is right. Life often tests us, but courage, patience, and clarity of purpose ensure that we emerge not only victorious but whole, reminding us that our peace and dignity are always worth defending.